Welcome to today's All Traffic Solutions webinar, In Pursuit of Traffic Data, How to Use Data Collection as Evidence. My name is Jennifer Saunders, Marketing Director for All Traffic Solutions. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us. And before we get started, I wanted to let you know that you'll receive an emailed link to the recorded presentation, and we invite you to share it with your colleagues. And now I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Heidi Traverso, our Director of Strategic Solutions.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming and joining the webinar today. My name is Heidi Traverso. I spent prior to coming to All Traffic Solutions, I spent 15 years or so on the Seattle Police Department. I spent that time in patrol and then also in the detectives unit before coming to All Traffic. And a lot of you might have already heard about our company. We're focused on creating and providing traffic solutions, and you might have seen or already be familiar with our radar speed display signs and message boards. And I'm quite proud to say that they are both engineered and built in the United States. We've been providing traffic solutions not only for law enforcement, but to a lot of departments within cities and county governments. And government actually isn't alone in its request for data metrics. We've seen a sharp rise in the requests from private industries who are also looking to solve their own unique challenges. Excuse me. We're witnessing kind of this new approach between not only departments but within their jurisdiction, but also with adjacent agencies. There's this growing coordination of separate groups to share resources and knowledge. Their common goals are identified. They share funding and combine resources. They're trying to solve their challenges together. And you might have already experienced this trend with when you're applying for grant funding. A lot of those really high dollar grants require multi-agency participation, and I know how hard that is. Not all agencies share the same mindset or commitment to the partnership. Some of them are even pretty backward. But the overall logic, and I think the hope behind those partnerships, is not only to pool resources, but to eliminate the likelihood of displacing problems from one area to another. The situation for cops currently, I think, is that I think if you pulled every single police department in the country, they'd all say the same thing. We have way more people to answer to. The population has doubled, tripled, quadrupled over recent years, but my department size hasn't increased. We've got the same amount of manpower or people power. Our budgets have been slashed, and they're expecting us to do more and more with less and less. And I know we all feel it. I felt it when I was there as well, when I was doing in the detectives unit. And you know, I don't really care where your cop shop is. There's an increased calls for service everywhere, and I think the response time is going up and up with that increase in calls. And there is a significant top-down pressure, and there's an expectation to handle everything as quickly as possible. And the knee-jerk reaction is to throw more cops at any and all problems. And typically that's not our idea of solving that problem. It's an administrative idea. And like my grandfather used to tell me, if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like, or all problems look like nails. And I think that's pretty accurate from the perspective of police departments. Just administration always wanted to throw more cops to solve a problem, and we all know that's not necessarily the solution. And I always think back to Albert Einstein's quote about insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and then expecting different results. So I think if you looked at how you currently manage your traffic safety programs, and you think about the tools that you use, the resources, the personnel that are devoted to that program, I think that you would find that by and large, it isn't efficient as it possibly could be. A lot of departments operate under the motto, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so things remain the same and unchanged over time, but the technology and the means to handle those situations or those types of calls have changed. We can use technology. Perhaps it's time to modernize. We can use technology to make tasks easier, address a wider range of problems and challenges. And I think overall we can create lasting change. I think if you look back over your careers and you remember we started with those huge brick Motorola radios, and I mean, my God, I used to type up my citations. And now instead of all of that, we've got these slick, smaller Motorola radios, and we've got computers with templated forms. And I just think we use so much technology in our personal lives. I mean, I know I would be lost without mine. So why aren't we integrating that into our police departments and our mission? I mean, technology really advances what we're trying to do, advances our mission, and it makes life easier and it allows us to really deliver higher quality results. So this isn't really meant to be a sales pitch, but it's really all I know, and it's why I chose to work at All Traffic Solutions. If you think about what we do, the equipment and the web-based software that we provide, known as the Traffic Cloud, it really aids law enforcement in streamlining processes, and it gives law enforcement the ability to gain what I like to call traffic intelligence. It's like other tools that we use, other web-based systems like in-car video, digital-based video suspect statements, total stations for investigating collisions, auto collisions. And if you think about what that means, traffic intelligence, it actually makes sense. It's just like gathering information from our police intelligence units. The information that's gathered, it educates us not only with what's happening, but it lets us determine what our next best plan of action should be. And in the same way, traffic intelligence shows us how and when and where to deploy our enforcement personnel and how we should be best using our speed calming equipment. Data helps because data is evidence. And evidence, when it's managed, it's meaningful. When it's manageable and meaningful, compiled in reports that provide exactly what our traffic safety programs need. Metrics in those reports, they support how we deploy our resources. Speed summaries at specific locations, they address the community's concerns, they can rank areas that may require additional enforcement. And you're on the right track with these programs when there's widespread acceptance or your proposal for that new approach methodology is being accepted. Okay, generally that widespread acceptance comes as a result of a reduction in complaints, or at least a prompter response, and it's noticed by citizens and it's supported by your documentation and your department. And I know from my experience that speeding complaints are the bane of all law enforcement because historically they've been really difficult to address. We get the complaints, and no matter what we do, how we try to handle them, the complaining citizen is never happy. We never did enough. We weren't there at the right time. We weren't there long enough, or we missed the problem. And it's true because I remember when I was in patrol, every month or so, my sergeant would give us all the neighborhood speeding complaints that are beat, and we were tasked to go out and log that we were there so that we could respond back to the citizens with whether there was or wasn't a speeding problem. The problem is that my primary duty was to answer 911 calls. So the only time I really had to devote to that task was like Sunday mornings at 4:30 in the morning, and it's when I was working First Watch, that was basically like after dirtbags went to bed and before citizens woke up to find their cars prowled or their businesses burglarized. So are really kind of a a necessary part of what we do. And when we look at how people interact with their local police department, most comes in the form of traffic stops and or as victims of some sort of crime, right? So responding to speeding complaints, I think, really gives us an opportunity to have a more positive interaction with our communities. And following this slide, I'm going to show you how to use a best practices methodology, and that will assist you in how this interaction, this positive interaction is maintained and promoted. But basically, you know, if we're giving a complainant our ears, we're listening, and then we follow up with them, giving them the results of the speed study regarding their complaint, I think they're going to be, and we've experienced working with police departments for several years now, that it's a great relief for police departments and the citizens together. So the best practices program, you know, I think what it really fundamentally comes down to is making life easier by implementing a consistent program that provides documentation, follow-up, and a resource program. What does that look like? The documentation is everything. It's what we do, and we do it well. I would suggest that we create some sort of log to track these complaints, even assigning numbers like incident numbers, and then we can put or log the date that we responded, who the complainant was, and then follow up with either a contact email or a letter stating that we did go out to the scene, we did a study, and it was determined to be X. And that type of documentation, you're providing this citizen with true data. That basically ends that complaint, right? Unless they're mental. And, you know, it's hard to believe, but some of our chronic complainants they possibly might be mentally ill. And a good number of ours certainly were. So the next question is really, how do you fund this sort of new approach to traffic safety? Everybody hates this annual process of budgeting. Budget requests are more likely to be funded when we can prove the need with data. And proving the before and after statistics with your new approach, it demonstrates the traffic calming success or your initiative. It increases community support because they feel heard and responded to. They notice the safety improvements. They notice the signs that are in their neighborhood. And it really streamlines our process, saving the department money, allowing us to reallocate resources. It makes the department look good. We look good. Life is good. And the other major funding for us is in the form of grants. But as you all know, grant funding is awesome, but it's really hard. It's a lot of us find that type of funding is out of reach. Grants can be intimidating. They're unfamiliar to us, and they can take a lot of time away from other tasks. And that's why so many of the larger departments have grant writers. They're lucky. I mean, most of us are scrambling just to complete our daily tasks, let alone take on this endeavor and devote one person to that endeavor. And actually, to be honest, I think it's the smaller departments who need the funding the most. And typically, when we do decide to write a grant, that goes to, I don't know, a light duty officer or some poor admin who's already doing too much. And, you know, the frustrating thing about applying for grants is that you've got to demonstrate that you have a problem and that you require this additional funding to solve it. So how the heck are you supposed to articulate that problem? And using data or that traffic intelligence thing, that provides you with exactly what you need to justify your request. And not only that, but once you're awarded that grant, it gives you the ease of meeting those grant reporting requirements. It's awesome. Here's an example of some of our reports that are generated through our Traffic Cloud software. They're easy to read, they're graphical. I am in huge favor of this, or my favorite report actually is the Enforcement Priority Report. What it does is you can select locations, one location or many. So for example, if you chose one location that, you do think more predominantly that location is experiencing a speeding concern, then when you put out the equipment, the Enforcement Priorities Report identifies which days of the week, hours of the day, how many violators, the average number of violators, and their average speed. So how many violators are occurring within that hour, and it ranks them. So you can actually target that location more effectively and more efficiently. The other part of the Enforcement Priorities Report lets you group locations, and those locations are again ranked. So you could select all the school zones that you've done traffic studies at, arterials, you can group accident locations or your speed studies, you can group incidents by the beat or precinct or all of them. It's just a really useful tool in identifying when and where to deploy your resources, your limited resources, right? So some of the reports that we offer are really more of an interest to engineering because they're primarily interested in the population and how it flows through an area. So it's relating really more to traffic flow, like volumes over time or volumes related to speeds. It might be interesting to us, but it's not necessarily applicable to what we do as cops, right? So, and quite simply, these reports are fantastic, automatic ways of gathering pertinent information and putting in a very simplistic and graphical form. I think that if you've ever seen those or want to see an example of those from us, you will be very pleased. Now when you consider this data and what it can do, consider sharing this data. When you share with Public Works and Engineering, you're really allowing everyone to address those common traffic safety concerns together, and then it doesn't really just fall on our shoulders. We're not the only ones responsible for the speeding events around our city. There's a lot of contributing factors, and by sharing that information, you're allowing those other departments within the city to address them as needed. So whereas like traffic engineering creates or determines the speed on roadways, the signage, Public Works is responsible for signage and road markings. So if you have an area, for example, that has or experiences a lot of accidents annually, maybe that's because the road markings or the signage is inadequate, or maybe the speed limit's too high, or the intersection signal timing is too rapid. There's a number of reasons why those accidents may be occurring, and not just because we're not out there enforcing the law. So sharing that data really, I think, maximizes the return on our time there, and it also shares the burden and responsibility. So I love Steve Jobs. I think that man is probably one of the greatest thinkers of our time. And he once gave a speech or a lecture about the direction and success of his life. And he said that it was almost impossible to connect the dots going forward with any kind of program or your future, that kind of thing. But it's very, very clear when you look back. And as he did some 10 years later, it was very clear to him how his career progressed. And that he also said that it's impossible to connect the dots going to the future, but they make sense when you connect them looking backwards. So he said you have to trust that the dots will connect your future, and that you have to trust in something. And he mentions karma and destiny, whatever, that belief gives you the confidence to follow your gut and do something, to continue on to do something, even if it's not, you deviate from the well-worn path. And I think, what does that have to do with law enforcement and this data? Well, it's going in a new direction and trying new approaches, taking risks, it's not easy. And I'd say it's even harder in the police culture. But as cops, we believe and trust in evidence. It's what we know and it's what we do. And since data is evidence, we can trust that it all makes a difference, that it makes sense. So using data as your fundamental means of creating these programs and making a difference really makes sense. Making a difference, I think, is still, making a difference. I remember when I was applying to be a cop as a very young woman, I thought the whole goal for me is to make a difference. I think it's the reason people start that career, and it still is the fundamental reason why we all enter this field. And making a difference here lets us plan for the future. It affects real changes for us all. And excuse me, I don't know who coined the phrase, but information to be useful must be shared. I think that could not be a more true statement. Sharing data that is current and accurate within your department and with surrounding agencies, it forms an alliance that profoundly impacts the safety of our communities and how we address issues. The sharing of that traffic intelligence, it really enables an effective coordination between traffic engineering, designing roadways, public works with all their signage and road markings, and then again with law enforcement who are responsible for traffic calming and traffic enforcement. So the bottom line really in all of this is that traffic data significantly benefits law enforcement and the communities we serve, because traffic safety isn't just part of our job. It's important because we all live in a community and we all live in someone's jurisdiction. So I hope that makes sense. I hope this has been beneficial, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Heidi. This concludes today's broadcast. If you have any questions, I invite you to visit All Traffic Solutions website. Just click on our contact page. You will find our phone number and email address. And if you're a customer and want to determine who your rep is, you can see a list of reps by state with their contact information. Thank you.